Star Wars 7x7 episode 1864. Today we talked about a certain Resistance spy in a previous episode of the show and wondered if she was making a surprise appearance in A Crash of Fate, and that would have kind of screwed the timeline up a little bit here, so we're gonna figure out how it all comes together. Let's go. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and this is another mild spoiler situation for A Crash of Fate, so if you need to save this episode for a later date, then by all means do, but if you're good with me jumping in on this and details that will affect the Galaxy's Edge theme park experience, as well as Black Spire, the novel by Delilah Dawson that's coming out later this month, and of course A Crash of Fate 2, well, yeah, let's just get right into it. So, earlier this week we talked about how a Resistance person on Batuu was described as having dark skin and tight curly hair kept short, and that this matches the description of Vi Moradi, the Resistance spy who was first introduced to us in the novel Phasma by Delilah Dawson, and who will also be appearing in the novel Black Spire by Delilah as well later this month, and who is also to be found roaming around in the Galaxy's Edge theme park too. Where things get tricky with this, though, has to do with, of all things, Vi Moradi's hairstyle. So the reason why the description of this Resistance fighter in A Crash of Fate has anything to do with Vi Moradi is because, as we discussed earlier this week, the promotional posters for Phasma, the novel by Delilah Dawson, depict Vi Moradi in a very similar fashion as a dark-skinned woman with tight curly hair kept short. However, the timeline doesn't seem to match up with it. And we talked about when Crash of Fate happens in comparison to the one day that the Galaxy's Edge theme park experience takes place. And it seems, just based on the way that people are reacting to the presence of the First Order, that they would have been on Batuu for longer in A Crash of Fate than by what we've already learned about the First Order and their presence in the Galaxy's Edge theme park. The reason why this doesn't seem to sync up in the timeline, though, is because Vi Moradi, or at least the cast member who is operating as Vi Moradi in Galaxy's Edge, does not have tight curly hair kept short. She has straightened, longer hair, and it is tinted a rather unnatural shade of blue, turquoise, aqua, however you want to describe it. And then we would go into A Crash of Fate, where it would be tight and curly and short again, and I'm operating under the presumption, and I could be wrong about this too, that the novel Black Spire is going to take place after the events of A Crash of Fate. And as Vi Moradi is gathering a group of people with whom she can operate, it seems like Izzy and Jules from A Crash of Fate might be involved in whatever shenanigans they're going to get up to in the Black Spire novel. So if you're keeping track, Vi would be going from short curly in Phasma to long and tinted in the Galaxy's Edge theme park to short curly in A Crash of Fate and to long, straighter, and tinted in Black Spire. It's possible, I suppose, that she could be wearing a wig. So yeah, there is an explanation in that regard too. But there is another detail. I've been digging into this over the past couple of days, and there is finally a detail that I came across that not only seems to clear this up, but also seems to suggest that it is not, in fact, Vi Moradi, after all, who appears in A Crash of Fate. And I will explain that detail after the break. Stay tuned. This episode is brought to you by Constant Contact, the premier email marketing solution for small businesses and organizations. I've used their service since 2003, and over the past decade and a half, I've watched them evolve, make the product simpler, more powerful, easy to use, and do everything that they can to help train people to use the product more effectively and for it to work with other forms of marketing like social media, for example. So check out sw7x7.com/email to learn more about Constant Contact and start a free trial. Once again, that is sw7x7.com/email for a free trial. Welcome back. So, for the record, I would still like to think that this is Vi Moradi who's appearing in A Crash of Fate, and obviously the jury's still out in that regard, but here's the particular detail that seems to suggest it might not be Vi Moradi. So, in the novel Phasma, there is an internal monologue reference to Vi's mother, who was on Chaktil. That's the name of a planet that she grew up on, or at least spent part of her childhood on. But in A Crash of Fate, this woman that Izzy and Jules meet with mentions that her own mother was a botanist on Ratio and had provided bulbs for Doc's gardens. So we don't necessarily know what Vi's mother's occupation was from any information in the novel Phasma. And of course, it's entirely possible that this woman from the Resistance in A Crash of Fate who is meeting with Izzy and Jules could just be saying something that might not entirely be true at all, because she doesn't know who Izzy and Jules are, doesn't trust them, and is just making up a particular detail. However, Ratio is noted as being part of the Hosnian system, which gives a sort of gravity to the proceedings, and it seems like potentially an unlikely lie to be telling, but because we're talking about something that's spoken aloud versus what happens in Phasma, which is inner monologue from the character Vi Moradi, well, yeah, it casts doubt on the possibility of whether this is Vi Moradi in A Crash of Fate. But like I said, I'm holding out hope for the possibility that it will be confirmed at some point that it is actually her, and whatever's going on with her hair is just, something else entirely. But anyway, there you go. That's a discussion of Vi Moradi's hairstyle and whether that affects how we view the different stories that we're being introduced to in the Galaxy's Edge, Black Spire Outpost, World of Atu situation, how that all ends up tying together in the Star Wars canon timeline. And that is going to do it for today's episode as well. Thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.